I was really looking forward to Shadow Generations after all the trailers and stuff, because it was actually looking very good. But one thing about the game that I was very skeptical about was the story, being that I knew it would be written by Ian Flynn, who, if you've watched my videos on the Sonic comics, and Sonic Frontiers especially, I have not at all liked anything that I've seen from him for Sonic in the past. It's been pretty awful so far, in my opinion. So I was really hesitant when it came to the story of this game. I saw in like an interview, Izuka was like, we worked really hard to try to tell a good story, and I'm like, okay, we'll see. You kind of said the same thing with Frontiers. And, yeah, unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, I did not like the story of Shadow Generations. At first. However, upon going back and doing a second playthrough of the game, not on stream, so I'm not distracted by trying to read chat, and seeing all of the optional dialogue that I missed on my first playthrough, and reading through all the Gerald journals, and going back and rewatching Dark Beginnings, and taking some time to mull things over and digest what they were doing here, I realized this story's actually kinda great. I have some problems with it. There's some things here that I don't love, some choices that I don't necessarily agree with, but this is really good. I'm being serious here. I'm not messing with you. I really liked the story of Shadow Generations. It actually does kind of feel like a true return to like old school Sonic storytelling. And if you're surprised to hear that I enjoyed the story as much as I did, join the club. I did not expect this at all. And like I said, on my first go around, I didn't like the story. It seemed like we had a lot of the same typical issues that I've had with Ian's writing for a while. But this is kind of a bit of a superstar situation. Like, even people that have liked this game's story, I've seen a lot of discussion of people saying, like, not too much is going on. But actually, there is some stuff going on here. It's just that it's not super obvious and in your face. Or maybe it is obvious, and I just wasn't seeing it because of things that I'll get into later. But anyway, before we get started talking about Shadow Gen's story, I want to quickly recap the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog, because that is very important for both this game's story and the context surrounding both it and my thoughts going into the story, and how I feel about it overall. If you've seen my Shadow the Hedgehog story video, then this is basically just going to be a recap of everything I talked about there, so if you want to skip ahead, I'll have chapters on the video. But if you've not heard this stuff before, hear me out, because I know a lot of people don't like the story of Shadow the Hedgehog, and I get it, because it's stupid and makes no sense. And I don't blame anyone for thinking that about that game's story, because the way it tells the story is incredibly confusing and convoluted. But when you unravel the mess of that game's story and see what it's trying to do, I actually think it's a pretty cool thing that they're doing with Shadow's character there. Shadow the Hedgehog was attempting to fix what was, in my opinion, a big problem with Shadow's character in Sonic Adventure 2, in that he had no agency. Shadow just wanted whatever Maria wanted. The only reason he wanted to destroy the world was because Gerald manipulated his memory into thinking that's what Maria wanted, and when he remembers what Maria actually wants, he instantly flips on a dime to, okay, well now I have to save the Earth. Shadow has no thoughts of his own, no drive of what he wants to do. It's just whatever Maria wants, that's what Shadow wants. And granted, that is a big part of what was going on in SA2's story. Shadow didn't know what his purpose was, and so in her death, Maria kinda gave her purpose to him. But still, I don't like this idea of Shadow just being an agent of Maria's will, rather than being an independent person for himself. I guess it works fine for a one-off character, as Shadow was originally intended to be, but when you bring him back, I have a problem with that. I mean, I have a problem with bringing him back anyway, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so in Shadow the Hedgehog, what they do is, we got all those non-canon endings with all this weird stuff going on. Those endings are supposed to be showing the person Shadow could be. Because, you know, it's the whole amnesia thing. He's trying to figure out who he is. He's trying to learn about his past to get an answer to the question, who am I? And we see many different possible answers to that question throughout those different endings. But importantly, all of those endings, all of those answers to that question for Shadow are not the answer. Those are not the person that he ends up becoming. Not even the ending where he regains his memories and goes back to trying to fulfill Maria's wish and he and Sonic team up to defeat Black Doom. Even that is not the person Shadow ends up being at the end of the game. The last story of Shadow the Hedgehog is in fact about subverting the entire quest that Shadow has been on throughout all the other routes in the game. Shadow's been looking for answers, and he's been looking for them from his past and from other people. If you look at all the endings in Shadow the Hedgehog, it's always someone else telling Shadow who or what he is. It's Black Doom telling him that he's an agent of the Black Arms meant to help him take over the world. It's Sonic and friends telling him that he's a hero. It's Eggman telling him that he's a shadow android created by him. It's the Gun Commander telling him that he's a monster that should have never been created. It's Gerald, after he's gone crazy, telling Shadow that he needs to fulfill their revenge. It's Maria telling Shadow that he has to protect everyone else's happiness. And once it's revealed that Black Doom helped create Shadow, we see even more attempts at manipulating his destiny by his creators. Black Doom intended for Shadow to be his harbinger for his invasion, but Gerald intended to betray the Black Arms. He was going to have Shadow be the beacon of hope for humanity and fix the problem that he caused by making this deal with Black Doom. Plus, if you think about Project Shadow itself, that again is people predetermining who Shadow is for him. Project Shadow was an attempt to achieve immortality. Shadow was supposed to be the key to doing that. Yet at the same time, Gerald was hoping that this project would lead to a cure for Maria's illness. That's another thing Shadow was supposed to be. Shadow's entire existence, literally right down to the reasons he was made by multiple different people, every single thing in his life had been other people telling him who and what he is. And in the finale of Shadow the Hedgehog, Shadow says, "No, enough of that, I'm done. No one is going to tell me who I am. I don't need the past to provide me answers to that question. I can answer it for myself." And so, Shadow rejects his past, all of his past. He wants nothing to do with it. The reason he defeats Black Doom at the end of the game is not because Gerald asked him to, it's because he wants to bury anything that connects him to what happened 50 years ago. That's why the final scene in the game is Shadow throwing away a picture of Maria and Gerald, the two people that he cared most about in the world. They now mean nothing to him, and what he says there, "Adios, Shadow the Hedgehog," that is a callback to Sonic Adventure 2. In the Japanese version, the Sayonara Shadow the Hedgehog is instead "Adios." And who says that in that game? Maria and Sonic, both when they think they're never going to see Shadow again. So what does it mean for Shadow to be saying that? He is divorcing himself from the Shadow that existed 50 years ago. He's saying, that's a different person. That's not me. And that Shadow that had all that baggage from all those people and all the things that led to his creation, he's gone. He's dead. And now we have a new Shadow. And I have always thought this was a really cool thing to do with Shadow's character because, as I said, I always found bringing Shadow back after SA2 to quite undermine his sacrifice at the end of that game. But this kind of undoes that slight because it means that Shadow isn't back. The Shadow from SA2, he's still gone. Instead, we have this new Shadow here. And like I said, this fixes the problem of Shadow having no agency here. They turn that into the major conflict of this game, and it's all about Shadow gaining agency for himself. I think this story is really cool. The way it's told is unfortunate, because it means most people didn't even know what the heck was going on in this game. But the ideas here work really well, and I think are honestly like the best way they could have developed Shadow's character after bringing him back. And this is what had me so worried about Shadow Generations leading up to the game's release, because recently we've seen a lot of stuff talking about Shadow and how he wants to continue to fulfill Maria's wish and all that kind of stuff, and going off of the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog, that really shouldn't be a thing. Shadow's character doesn't care about Maria anymore. He's not trying to fulfill her wish. Shadow now acts of his own volition, not because of some promise that he made in a previous life. So seeing them talking about this kind of stuff and seeing the trailers of Shadow Generations and how he's acting around Maria, it seemed evident to me that they had essentially retconned the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog out of existence, because a lot of people don't like the idea of Shadow abandoning Maria, and a lot of people don't even know that's a thing, and in general, a lot of people don't like the story of Shadow the Hedgehog, so I figured they're like, you know what, screw it, we're just gonna forget about that. And I know some people try to argue that just because you move on from your past doesn't mean you can completely pretend like it doesn't exist. Shadow still had those experiences. He still went through that trauma. He's still going to think about Maria, at least to some degree. But the thing is, Shadow the Hedgehog itself never even makes it clear how much of his memory he regains. A lot of the stuff in that game is him being told about his past. So if he hadn't even regained his memories of Maria that much, then he definitely wouldn't care about her. But regardless, while you could say that Shadow maybe still thinks about Maria to a degree, we haven't seen that. The last time we saw anything regarding Shadow and his connection to Maria was him saying, "Fuck that shit." And now in Shadow Generations, with absolutely nothing bridging the gap, we see that he evidently very much does care about Maria and he misses her. And seeing Shadow in this game saying that he's going to fulfill Maria's wish, I'm like, okay, yeah, so they have just said, fuck that, we just have SA2 Shadow again. And I really hate that idea, because that's undermining the cool character development that Shadow the Hedgehog gave to Shadow, which also, by extension, re-undermines SA2, because it undoes his sacrifice in that game again, and it also reintroduces Shadow's lack of agency. So based on that, I fundamentally just dislike the ideas of what Shadow Generations was doing. I really cannot stand when you have a story that's like trying to do something nice and it gets completely shat on by a follow-up story in the same series. Like, thematically, what does that say? Like, the ending song of Shadow the Hedgehog, Never Turn Back. That game is saying that the past doesn't have to define who you are. You can choose the person you want to be. But if this game is just gonna undermine that, then it should have a new vocal theme called Nevermind. Absolutely turn back. Because that's what undoing Shadow's character development is saying. And I think this is a big part of why I didn't enjoy the story of Shadow Generations the first time around, because it appeared to be that this game was confirming exactly what I feared. And with Shadow just being SA2 Shadow in this game, there's basically nothing going on. It's like Black Doom shows up again, Shadow gets pulled into white space from the Time Eater stuff, he encounters Maria and Gerald, he has to defeat Black Doom, and then he gets his chance to finally say his goodbye to Maria that he never got before, and that's it. And that's where I was like, this is just more fucking Ian Flynn crap, where nothing fucking happens. No character development, no theme, no nothing. But I was wrong. As a matter of fact, Shadow Generations does not only not ignore the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog, it is a direct follow-up to it. Kind of. This is what really tripped me up in seeing what this game was doing, and this is a choice here that I'm not in love with, but I'll give it a pass. This game does not say the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog did not happen. Actually, if you talk to Rouge, she directly talks about Shadow putting the past behind him and being a different Shadow than the one from 50 years ago. But what this game does is it retcons the reason Shadow abandons his past. In Shadow the Hedgehog, he abandons his past because he's like, this is a bunch of bullshit. My past fucking sucks, fuck that. But in Shadow Generations, the reason that Shadow abandoned his past is because he doesn't want to think about Maria and how she's gone now. If you think about it, Shadow has never gotten the chance to grieve for Maria's loss. In SA2, he was all about the revenge and then trying to fulfill her wish, and then he has amnesia, and then right when he learns everything, he throws it all away. This game proposes that that extreme reaction by Shadow is because he doesn't want to face the pain of thinking about a lost loved one. And I gotta give Ian a lot of props for this, because so many people hate Shadow abandoning Maria here, and it would have been very easy to just retcon that and say, no, that's gone, we're not doing that anymore. He's SA2 Shadow, just like everyone thinks he is and everyone wants him to be. But no, he kept that. He just made a slight change to it that, again, I'm not in love with, and I'll talk more about why later. But it ends up working well for this story, because as we see at multiple points, whenever Shadow does start to think about Maria, he stops himself. He says, no, that's a life that's been lost to me. I gotta focus on the mission and stop chasing dreams and fantasies. But really, what Shadow is saying there is, don't think about her. Don't think about her. It hurts too much to think about her. Don't think about her. And upon revisiting Dark Beginnings, I realized this is what the entire story is about. Dark Beginnings initially to me seemed pointless. Classic Ian Flynn stuff. Not a whole lot happening and a bunch of pointless action scenes. Oh, Shadow fights Emerald, isn't that cool? Shadow, Rouge, and Omega fight a bunch of Eggman robots. They fight some gun robots. Nothing's actually happening, but it's cool, right? Because if you look at just the core plot points, you can boil pretty much all of Dark Beginnings down to Shadow has a nightmare that causes him to suspect Black Doom is back, and he wants to get on the Ark to investigate it. By the way, the moon is broken again, apparently. Is it gonna stay broken? Is it gonna go back to being unbroken? Is there an explanation for how it's broken once more after not being broken for so long? Whatever. And episodes 2 and 3 are basically pointless because, weird thing, he needs to get like on a rocket to get to the Ark, but in SA2, he just gets there, and I think it's implied that it's done through chaos control, but whatever, it's fine. Now I realize that Dark Beginnings is critical to this story. I had thought that the point of it was just to establish a bunch of stuff for people that didn't know as much about Shadow, like we introduced Maria and her illness, and Shadow being the ultimate life form and how he's supposed to cure her, Rouge and Omega and his relationship with them, even the gun commander who now has a name, Abraham Tower. I figured that's all this was, just a way to get people up to speed on some of the things that they might not know in preparation for the game. But actually, no. This sets up everything, because in those flashback scenes with Maria, we get nice moments between the two of them, but to my surprise, considering this is a story by Ian, these are more than just nice little character interactions. In the first one, Maria and Shadow are spending some time together, enjoying each other's company, but then Maria starts to feel weak from her illness, and Shadow gets frustrated because he was supposed to provide the cure for her, and it's not been working. She's still sick, and he's angry at himself over that. But then Maria comforts him and calms him down. And then in the second one, Shadow is looking at a Black Arms larva, saying that he's made from the same DNA, and he's the same thing as this heartless, disgusting monster. And Maria says, that's not true, Shadow. You have a kind heart. What you do is what defines you. And it's a nice little moment, but these two scenes establish something very important. Maria was a very big emotional support to Shadow. She would help him when he was struggling with his internal conflicts. And that is really nicely built on in episode 3 of Dark Beginnings, where after they've infiltrated the gun base and Shadow starts taking off in his rocket, the guns start pointing at it. But the gun commander, Abraham, shows up and he tells everybody to stand down due to the events of Shadow the Hedgehog. And he tells Rouge that, you know, you could have just asked and we would have let you take the rocket. But Rouge comments that it's not like Shadow's ever going to ask for something. And he says, you could have talked him down, you know. And Rouge has this very nice comment. There's only one person that could ever talk Shadow down. And of course, she's gone now. And then we get into Shadow Generations proper, and there's actually an inconsistency here. In Dark Beginnings, Shadow gets the feeling that Black Doom might be back and wants to go investigate the Ark, but at the very start of the game, he says that Gun got a reading of some life form here, and that's why he's here to investigate? So that's a little weird, don't know how that happened, but whatever, it's not a big deal. But this is where he encounters Black Doom, who is back before even all the Time Eater stuff starts happening, which is a bit weird to me. You'd think it'd be more elegant to just have him be back from time travel shenanigans, but in the end I think it was the right choice because of what they end up doing with this story. But the reason Black Doom is back is just like hand-waved away. It's just like he didn't die. That's it, basically. He didn't die at the end of Shadow the Hedgehog. He's still been around recovering. And it's like, wow, okay, I mean, that's a way to bring back your villain, but, you know, if I wanted to be generous, you could say this is just being true to the Sonic series, aping off of Star Wars. Somehow, Black Doom returned. So that's a little dumb, but whatever. So they get pulled into white space, and it's not long before Shadow encounters Black Doom, and we kind of get the rundown between him and Gerald explaining what his plan is. Essentially, Black Doom plans to take over Shadow's body, basically. Shadow was created to be like the ultimate weapon for the Black Arms, and so now Black Doom wants to fulfill Shadow's true ultimate purpose and become one with him. After all, Shadow is directly made from Black Doom's DNA, so they are connected directly in that way. Back in Shadow the Hedgehog, Black Doom could control Shadow. So, okay, sure, I'm fine with that. And again, that's very Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine trying to resurrect himself into Rey or whatever. But anyway, that's what the Doom powers are. As Shadow is going through all the levels in the game, you encounter Black Doom a couple of times, and he's always talking about how you're not ready yet, Shadow, and he encourages Shadow to get angry and be aggressive, and he's like, yes, very good, Shadow, and whenever Shadow attacks Black Doom, he's like, yes, Shadow, excellent, things are going very well. And that's when Shadow gets those symbol things that he uses to gain his Doom powers. And those Doom powers are essentially like Shadow being made more and more like Black Doom, being granted the power of the Black Arms. And the more Doom powers Shadow acquires, the more like Black Doom he becomes, and the closer he gets to them becoming one, as Black Doom intends. So Shadow is just falling into Black Doom's hands this entire time. And towards the end of the game, Black Doom shows up and he starts taunting Shadow, saying, struggle all you want, but you will be mine. You and I are the same, Shadow. We are one. And Shadow gets very pissed off by all this taunting, and clearly he's being influenced by all this Doom power that he's absorbed. And again, it's very Star Wars, given to your hate, to your anger. They don't explicitly state it, but I presume this rage is like the Doom power starting to corrupt Shadow's mind, and that's gonna put him into the state Black Doom needs him to be in to take over his body. But then, Maria says, no, Shadow, this isn't you. It makes me sad to see you so angry like this. And she goes on this whole nice spiel about why she named Shadow, that without light there's only darkness, but a shadow lets you know which direction the light is in, and that manages to calm Shadow down, just like Maria used to do. And after this, Shadow gets all of his Doom powers, and Black Doom is like, yes, Shadow, you are complete. Now come face me, and we shall become one. But thanks to Maria's words, Shadow is no longer being corrupted by Black Doom's influence. And if my interpretation is correct, then it is directly because of Maria that Shadow is able to win the day here. If she wasn't there, then Shadow would have given in to his anger. After all, she's the only person that can talk him down. He would have been consumed by this dark hatred that Black Doom is trying to spur on in him. And if he had succeeded at that, then Black Doom would have made his point that they are the same. Remember all the way back in episode 2 of Dark Beginnings? Shadow looking at the Black Arms and thinking he's the same as that thing? Had Shadow given in to that darkness, he would be, and then Black Doom would have been able to take over his body. It's because of Maria that Shadow is able to win the day here, but more so, Shadow wins the day here because he once again becomes willing to open his heart to Maria. If you look at that scene after Shadow gets his wings, then all the energy around him is this dark blackness. But then Shadow has this big surge of energy, and it's this golden light that kind of pushes the darkness out of him. I see that as Shadow letting Maria in once again, and her positive influence pushes Black Doom out. And we kind of get as much confirmed when Shadow says that he's abandoned that anger and he is going to fight to fulfill Maria's wish again, something that he had abandoned long ago. It was something that he wanted to detach himself from. He wanted to forget about it because he didn't want to think about Maria. But the truth is, Shadow needs Maria. Like I said, if not for her, Shadow would have been overwhelmed by darkness. She is his emotional support that helps him through difficult times. And for so long, Shadow has been denying himself the emotional support he needed because he was too afraid to face the pain of losing Maria. This game's premise, with Black Doom and him trying to take over Shadow's body and the Doom powers, to me, it feels like it represents harmful thoughts and feelings, the things that lead you to develop negative beliefs about yourself, whereas Maria represents positive thoughts and feelings, the reassurances that help you realize that you're not as bad as you might think you are. Every time Shadow takes on another Doom power, that's another dark thought crawling its way into his head, and without Maria, Shadow has no way of fighting off these thoughts. They just add up more and more, and if you allow these negative thoughts to thrive in your mind, then they can turn you into something you're not. Black Doom is what you become when you allow your negative thoughts to take over who you are as a person. But as long as Shadow holds Maria dearly, he could never become Black Doom. Shadow defeating Black Doom here is him conquering the monster he could become if he continued to push Maria away. She is his strength that allows him to tackle difficult things. But to get that strength back, Shadow needed to tackle the most difficult thing of all, losing Maria. And ironically, the thing Shadow needed to finally confront losing Maria was Maria. She was his light, and without her, there was only darkness in Shadow. But getting to see Maria again, that allowed Shadow to see which direction the light was coming from. And that comes back at the end of the game. Now that Shadow has let Maria back into his heart, he doesn't want to face the pain of losing her again. He wants to freeze time and keep her there forever so he doesn't have to lose her. But she says, "It's okay, Shadow. I'll always be with you in your heart." And then Shadow runs off, and as he passes by Rouge, a tear lands on her cheek from him. But that tear is not from the sadness of having to say goodbye to Maria. That tear is from Shadow finally allowing himself to grieve, finally allowing himself to feel the pain of losing Maria. Shadow now understands just how important Maria was to him, and he's not going to let her go again, even if it's going to be painful. He now has the strength he needs to confront that pain. Oh my god! What the heck was that? That was lovely! That was wonderful! And I'll happily admit that after I realized what this story was doing and I went back through it another time, I felt emotional at that ending. It's fantastic! When the heck did Ian learn how to write a proper Sonic story? Like, this is everything that I want to be seeing out of Sonic stories. It had a lovely theme, we get some nice character development for Shadow. It mostly respects what came before, it doesn't undermine previous ideas. And it continues the old 2000 Sonic game tradition of Shadow being a way more nuanced character than everybody else combined. That's so good, man. That's so good. Hey, look, I have had a lot of criticisms for Ian's writing and handling of Sonic previously, but I give him full props on this. Round of applause to Ian by me. This was great. And you know, that's not even everything here that really works for me and I liked a lot. Characterization, people love their characterization in Sonic, and I have been very much someone that's like Ian's versions of the characters. They're not the same as the characters, they're his versions, they don't really feel like them to me. This story, everyone felt like the real characters. Shadow especially feels very much like Shadow. We don't have grrr, angry Shadow here. Rouge and Omega are handled really well here. There's some nice optional dialogue when you talk to them, alluding to the bond between the three of them, which I appreciate. And I really like how Ian has characterized Maria here, because we haven't gotten a whole lot of Maria in the Sonic games before. She's always just been like, Shadow, I'm the frail girl from your past that's traumatized you. That's my character. But here, through some of her optional dialogue and reading stuff in the Gerald journal, she's like really energetic and fun, and I really like that for her. Even Big, his optional dialogue, there's a lot of cute stuff in there that I really like. And Gerald's journal is excellent. I love this thing. It takes so many bits of lore from various things, SA2, Battle, Shadow the Hedgehog. So many things that were not actually in the games, but were very important to the stories of those games that you had to go online and see that it's from some walkthrough or a Japanese manual that was never officially translated, and all this stuff. It's like, why did they not put any of these important story details in the games? Now they're finally all consolidated nicely in one place where you can see all this info, and they do a really nice job of connecting all these things together, and like, they reference some really deep stuff that I thought was just like gone forever from Sonic. Like Gerald going to Angel Island, it mentions that he finds a ring with an engraving on it that mentions a legend, and it's like, that's from the fucking Japanese Sonic 3 manual, holy shit! And even like the stupid reason of why it's called Project Shadow, for like trying to create something that can't exist, and technically shadows aren't real things, they're a lack of light, so whatever. Like, they keep that, but they also keep the thing of Maria naming Shadow, and they connect those two things, and it works. Everything is connected here together, and it all works and fits. They even have some direct pages from like the Battle and SA2 journals to make this feel like the legit real Gerald journal. It's really great. The only criticisms I have for it is that it omits anything relating to Shadow being based off of Sonic, which I'm not going to get into the details right now, but trust me, that is not just a fan theory. There is so much evidence in SA2 pointing to that being the case. And it would have been nice if they officially confirmed that and went into it here, but I guess they want to still keep that a mystery, even though it's definitely what happened. And also, tiny nitpick, there's another inconsistency in here. It says that Abraham was born on the Ark from two of the scientists in the journal, but when you talk to Maria, she says that he was brought up by his parents, so another small inconsistency, but again, not really a big deal. Also worth pointing out, I guess I have to eat my words a little bit here, because I've talked so much about how humans are gone from Sonic because branding, whatever. But here they are. We got Maria and Gerald both in this game. We have Abraham and Gunn in Dark Beginnings. And I gotta say, I really like the models for Gerald and Maria here. I think this is easily the best humans have ever looked in Sonic. They fit. They don't create this, like, gross contrast like the 06 humans or whatever. And the anime look in Dark Beginnings also works for me really well. In general, Dark Beginnings is absolutely gorgeous. The animation, the action scenes, all really, really fantastic there. Though I do have to be a little cynical here and wonder if humans showing up now is a change for the Sonic series. Like, maybe it's okay for humans to show up again. They're loosening their branding restrictions a bit. Or is this just a special case that they're making for Shadow because we're dealing with his past and there's no way around it? Like, I'd be surprised if we started seeing humans show up in the IDW comics or even future games, but I guess we'll see. One other thing I would criticize here is a problem I've had with Ian's writing in the past, but it's nowhere near as bad as previous things. His reliance on references to previous Sonic things, way reduced from, like, the obnoxiousness of Frontiers or the comics, which I appreciate, but I still feel like the references in the dialogue should not be there. I really dislike Sonic and Shadow going over their spiels when they meet each other. And the moment when Maria talks Shadow down, as nice as it is, and as well as it fits into the themes of this story, it is actually something from another source. It's from this Sonic Channel manga from a couple years ago. And that kind of pulled me out of the scene a bit, because it was just like, oh, it's just another reference. But it's not just another reference. It's taking that idea and using it for something much grander here. So I'm willing to forgive that one, even if it was a bit distracting to me. Plus, considering the fact that most people haven't seen that, it was never officially translated, I get wanting to have that in a nicer form with a proper cutscene and voice acting and everything, and it does work very well for this story. But still, in general, I really don't like using lines, and especially in the comics when they would do song lyrics, that drove me fucking nuts. Because there are so many iconic moments and lines from the Sonic games that people quote over and over. You know, how many Sonic fans can recite Sonic and Shadow's meeting in Green Forest down to a T? And I would like it if Ian would stop relying on those lines all the time and instead try to make his own lines that would be iconic Sonic moments that people would be quoting for years to come, you know? So that's something I didn't love, and there's a little bit of clunkiness in the story and the dialogue every so often. Like the whole fake emerald thing, I get it, it's done to tie this game in with Sonic Generations, and just like the old school Sonic games when we would have multiple stories tying into each other, tying them together kind of just ends up harming the story, because all the stuff regarding Sonic Generations here has nothing to do with this story and is basically a waste of time. And the whole fake emerald thing, first of all, Shadow just takes that for absolutely no reason. Like, what's his motivation for taking that thing with him? Also, wouldn't that be destroyed because it blew up when Sonic put it in the Eclipse cannon and then it exploded? But then also they introduced this clunky thing of Sonic and Shadow, you know, the boss fight from Sonic Generations. Sonic beats Shadow, takes his emerald, but actually he took the fake emerald. I have the real one. And then at the end of the story, Rouge is gonna swap the emeralds without Sonic knowing so he can beat the bad guy. And it's like, what the fuck is the point of any of that? Is it just so Shadow can have a Chaos Emerald to do Chaos Control? Because you can do Chaos Control with a fake emerald. We know that because Sonic does it in SA2. So why couldn't Sonic just take the real emerald and Shadow keeps the fake one, and then you're good? Certainly not huge problems or anything, just a little bit of awkwardness and stuff that's kind of distracting us from the main meat of the story. But I'd say a bigger problem I'd have for this story, probably my main criticism for it, is that it's a little hard to grasp, which is honestly a problem that a lot of Sonic games have. Like I said, my first go-around, I did not pick up on where this story was going, and it seems like a lot of other people haven't picked up on it. And how often has that been the case for Sonic games? Like, people thought Superstars had no story, people think Shadow the Hedgehog has no story, as I already talked about. Even SA2, a story that people like, there's so much going on there that people do miss a lot of aspects of what that story is trying to do. Sonic games really need to work on conveying their stories more clearly, because a lot of them have cool ideas and kind of manage to do them well, but it's not always clear, or it's confusing, and then some jackass has to make a bunch of story videos breaking all this stuff down for people. But in this case, I'm gonna assume that is from a budgetary constraint, because Shadow Generations obviously is a smaller Sonic game, so I assume they only had so much budget for cutscenes, so they made do with what they had. But it can mean that these things might go over people's heads, or some important bits are relegated to side stuff. Like, one thing about this that you might go, wait a minute, doesn't this mean we have taken away Shadow's agency again because he's back to fulfilling Maria's wish? Well, if you talk to Gerald, he has some dialogue about, Maria's wish is nice, but don't let that be the only thing you live for, Shadow. I want you to be happy yourself. So I was like, okay, they're covering their asses here. Shadow still does have his agency, so I appreciate that they got that in there at all. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is that technically Shadow should already know that Maria still lives on in his heart, if we want to look at Sonic Battle, where he says as much. But Sonic Battle is a giant mess, because that game was written at the same time as Sonic Heroes, and there was clearly some miscommunication with the writers there, because that game, Shadow, his characterization is totally messed up there. That game would have to take place after Shadow the Hedgehog, which wasn't even made at the time, because Shadow has his memories back. Yet at the same time, he's going on and on about Maria, and his whole thing in that game is that he sees himself and Emerald as nothing more than weapons created for war. which that completely contradicts the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog. He should both not care about Maria and not care about what purpose he was built for because he's thrown all that stuff away. But again, Shadow wasn't written at the time, and there was miscommunications. Really, Shadow should have amnesia in battle, is probably how that should work. It should take place between heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog. But it is what it is, and it's just a whole mess, and I think smartly here, Ian has decided to just ignore that, and I agree with that decision. That's one thing where I'm like, yes, let's retcon that, let's change it. If they ever revisit battle, they should definitely alter Shadow's characterization there, because it was a total mess. And this is much better, so I'm fine with that. You know what else is nice about this game's story? The unimaginably improved cutscenes in this game. Holy shit, how many times have I complained about the cutscenes of Sonic games? Because they've been so poorly animated and directed since literally the very beginning with Sonic Adventure. And now, finally, we have quality-ass cutscenes here. Good animation, good directing, good pacing. Things happen throughout this story. It's not just scenes of people standing around talking. We get some action moments that are pretty cool. The fight between Sonic and Shadow was nice. And even then, when we do have the scenes of people just standing around talking, they're way more engaging with much nicer posing and much nicer camera work. They actually did exactly what I asked for in my Frontiers story video. They got a cinematographer, finally. And you know what else I was pleasantly surprised to see? There are even some biblical elements in here. Wow, that I did not expect. For anyone that's not aware, Shadow is, for whatever reason, a very biblically inspired character. If you think about a historian essay 2, Gerald wants to punish all of humanity for their sins, and Shadow sacrifices himself to stop that from happening, literally being that Shadow died for our sins. And then, of course, we have Black Doom, who is just Satan, and he makes a deal with the devil, with Gerald, selling out humanity to finish Shadow and hopefully save Maria. And then Mephiles, obviously, is referencing Mephistopheles, and he's like a demon trying to pull Shadow to the dark side. So Shadow's a Bible character for whatever reason, and there's actually some biblical stuff here. The giant Black Doom thing floating in the sky, he looks like an angel, apparently, because for some reason, in the Bible, angels don't look like people with wings on their backs like we usually think of. They look like JRPG final bosses, and that design is clearly aping off of that. And of course, Shadow gets his wings, which kind of feel like more traditional, what we think of as angel wings, but they're all like evil and demony, so I don't know, maybe it's trying to invoke like a fallen angel thing, but then Shadow rises back up or something. I don't know anything about the Bible, but there's clearly something going on here, and I appreciate that. I feel like just because it's been a thing, we gotta keep biblical elements part of Shadow's character. It's a motif for him at this point, and I kinda like it. So yeah, kinda blown away in many different regards here to see what this story is, how it ended up working out, and how good it is. But I will say, I do still not ideally love the idea of retconning the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog. Like I said, now the idea of Shadow throwing away his past is because he doesn't want to face the pain of losing Maria, which kind of now ends up making the ending of Shadow the Hedgehog a bad ending, if we want to apply that there. Now it's like Shadow is remembering everything that happened to him, and when he thinks about Maria, he can't handle it, so he bottles all that up and tries to sever that off, and that turns into the big triumphant finale, you know? That's really weird, and like I said, it undermines the theme of Shadow the Hedgehog, but to be fair, Shadow the Hedgehog undermines one of the themes of Sonic Adventure 2 already, and it's not like this series isn't filled with horrible, gross retcons left and right, and as far as that stuff goes, this honestly isn't the worst we've ever had, so considering how good this story is, I think I'm willing to let it slide here. And I do believe that is everything I have to say about the story of Shadow Generations. Color me impressed. I suppose I should talk briefly about the Sonic Generations rewrites, because that's been a point of discussion apparently. A lot of people not happy about these rewrites, and as the guy with the reputation for being an Ian Flynn hater, y'all gotta calm down. For the most part, these rewrites are fine, harmless, or pointless. There's only like 3 or 4 lines that I think are stupid, but also it's Sonic Generations and that game doesn't even have a story, so who cares? Look at that, Pariah defending Ian Flynn in a Sonic story video. Who would have ever seen that one coming? I mean, I certainly don't like pretending that Amy has never had feelings for Sonic as much as the next guy, but that's just modern day Sonic branding stuff, as I've talked about before in my previous videos. But that doesn't necessarily have anything specifically to do with this generation's rewrite. That's just the direction Sonic is going in now, at least outside of Japan, because a really weird thing about these rewrites is none of them were applied to the Japanese Sonic script. In that version, Amy does say the same thing she did in the old generation, so apparently we're back in the 90s. We got a different Sonic for Japan and the rest of the world, and I hate that, but surely nothing bad will ever come of that in the future, right? I'm sure it won't be confusing at all. I guess to end things off here, as much as I really like this story, this has not entirely won me over with Ian Flynn as a writer for Sonic, because this is his first hit after many misses. So I'm still very wary, but I will say that after this story, I no longer feel dread for the future of Sonic storytelling. If Ian can keep this up and continue to tell stories in this same kind of vein and this same level of quality, or even better, I would be really happy with that. But we'll see. We'll see what the future holds, but for now, between this and Sonic Superstars and Scrapnik Island, we're starting to get back to some Sonic stories that I can actually get behind and really enjoy, so maybe things are finally turning in the right direction. As one final thing I would like to say here at the end of my long series of Sonic story videos, I would like to give the biggest shout out I possibly could to Windii. Her Japanese translations of not just the games, but so many other Sonic materials, including manuals and the old Sega technical files and Sonic Channel materials and everything you can possibly think of. She has done so much incredible work that is invaluable to the Sonic community. She has enabled so many people to learn so much more about the Japanese side of Sonic than they ever would be able to otherwise. And this series of videos has been, in part, thanks to her, so everyone, go show your appreciation for Windii. She really deserves it. She is one of the pillars of the Sonic community, if you ask me. There'll be a link to her blog in the description, where you can also get access to her YouTube channel and her coffee if you want to support her, and I hope she continues to be awesome in the future.